So in this week's episode of Vice Versa, we're going to be talking about Tesla's recall that might be happening. GM and Nikola might be on the outs. The first public semi-charging station is coming out. And Elon Musk says the full self-driving is coming next year. And as usual, I'm joined by Ricky. How you doing, Ricky?
We have one. I was hearing the audio from the stream, but I think we're sorted out now on that.
Okay.
Yes, we are live. So bear with us. This is actually quite fun. I was a little nervous before, but now it's kind of like, let's see what happens. And there might be some little hiccups along the way, but episode 4 of Vice Versa with Matt and Ricky, and we're broadcasting live. From now on, I believe we're going to aim for 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern on Thursdays, live broadcast. So we've got a couple of comments already. I think I saw somebody, Canadian Bernie Bro. Hello, so glad you could make it. And let's see what happens. You want to start off with the very first story? I will, I think, start off the very first story.
You jump off with the first one.
Yes. Okay, so this is a story that I think you can relate to because you made a video kind of covering this for the Model 3, but there was a little bit of an issue with a recall or some issues with Tesla's touchscreens on their Model S and X's. So these are actually some of their older cars, and the issue is kind of large, but it's not the end of the world. The reason why I brought this up is because if you know, Tesla made the decision that we're going to have in the Model 3 and the Y just one huge screen, which has a lot of benefits. But the one downfall is if that screen doesn't work, as Matt can chime in and protest to, you're in trouble. You can't even check how fast you're going. You lose navigation. You can't check your backup camera. You're driving in the dark. Now, the car does still operate, but it's a major safety concern because you don't even have a speedometer. And I think it just goes to show you that some of this is burgeoning technology. The things that we're doing we're doing for the very first time. And as great as those touchscreens are, the software is updated very frequently and things can go wrong. So, I don't know where you are, Matt, if you're an aggressive or default mode person for software intervals, but this is one of those things that might want to make you think and choose wisely, I guess.
Yeah, I'm definitely on the aggressive side, but I live on the edge of technology, so I'm used to it. So when my screen went black, I wasn't happy, but I rolled with it. But it is alarming, to say the least, when that happens. The fact that your car has no instrumentation whatsoever because it's all on the screen, and when that goes, you're flying blind, like literally. So it's a little disturbing. The thing about this though is there's the thing that's looming is this will this end up as a recall? And that's been getting a lot of the press of Tesla might be issuing a recall. Like, this is a horrible thing. Tesla's on fire. It's like every car company has recalls. This is very normal. It's like every car company has gone through this exact process for something. Just think about the airbag recalls that have been happening for every manufacturer. It's like Ford, Nissan, everybody is going through this with having to do a recall on the airbags because they might explode. So it's like Tesla having this. It's not great, but they'll do the right thing. They'll take care of the customers. And if the US government says that they have to perform some kind of recall, they'll do it. But I don't see this as something that's really bad, but it's something that they need to take care of to make sure their customers are safe.
Yeah, it kind of straddles the line of innovation and technology, cool features everyone loves when they add Spotify. But when your main instrument cluster and a lot of your information and input into the entire system interface is all in that screen, yeah, it's more than just infotainment. It's way more than that. I made a video in the past talking about how Tesla's decision to have just one big screen for the 3 was kind of brilliant. So I had a chance to ride with Tesla Raj in his FSD beta car, and they have a new UI. It's really pretty slick. You open the door, and the door animates open, and it shows the windows as they roll down. There's a lot of really cool stuff. And there's a little bit of a rumor we'll see that Tesla might roll out a software for the holiday season, and it might include that. We'll see, especially for people who don't have FSD. I'm not so sure, but that's really cool. I'd love to see a new UI. And when your entire car is a screen, you can refresh it, kind of modernize it, update stuff. They're just the kind of things you can't do with a conventional car. So I still think it's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
But yeah, learning, growing pains. You're going to have to deal with it. Hopefully, it's not as massive as it seems, but yeah, it's going to be one of those things I have to figure out.
Yeah, I'm on the same page with that. It's software. The software interface can grow and evolve over time. Where you have switches and knobs, those are what they are forever. So it's like I'd much rather have a software interface that can adapt as they roll out new features. They find ways that users are using their cars in ways they didn't expect, so they can adjust the interface. So that's right up my alley. I mean, I was a UI designer for over 20 years, so I am very excited about that aspect of my car experience. So
yeah, and
do we want to jump?
depending on when you buy your car, you'll see, just really quick, you'll find like it'll be a piano black knob or like a fake carbon fiber, whatever was in at that time. But whatever you choose to do, I can assure you 5 years later, your choice is going to be like dated.
It's going to look really, really dated.
Exactly. So yeah, it totally makes sense.
All right. So the next story that's up is GM canceling the deal with Nikola. This one, when I saw this, I had to add this to the list. It got me so excited because it's just like the Nikola story just will not stop. It's just the punches keep coming. My favorite part about all of this was that GM announced the deal between Nikola right before all that stuff hit the fan with Nikola. And so suddenly GM was not looking too great. And now it turns out since then the negotiations have continued and GM is backing out of part of the deal and they're no longer going to be building the Nikola Badger for them, but they're still going to be supplying the hydrogen fuel cell stuff for the semi-truck. So they're still going to be doing something with Nikola, but they've really dialed back what they're doing. So it doesn't surprise me that they're doing this because they got some egg on their face getting all tied up with Nikola. But this is just the story that keeps on giving to me.
Well said. The story that keeps on giving. Yeah, we've gone through, it feels like 5 years of news with this story. So yeah, just to reiterate, there is still a deal and they're basically a customer. Like, yeah, we have hydrogen fuel cells. If you want to use them, you can pay us money and you can have it just like anybody else. So it's not really like what I would call like a partnership, which is what it would be before. They'd have $2 billion stake and they were going to provide parts and in exchange for that stake. So that was a true partnership where GM would have a minority stake in Nikola. That is no longer the case. Now you can be a customer and that is all kind of a thing. So I mean, it's pretty bad. Like we can kind of spin it to say that there's still an arrangement of sorts, but the deal is pretty much kibosh at this point. And yeah, what can you say? To be honest with you, I actually didn't know what would happen to the stock by now. So I think the lockout period for Trevor Milton and the early investors is over. So I think they can start to dump their shares. And I was kind of thinking it might be poetic justice if the shares were worth like nothing by the time he could actually sell them. But they're not. Nikola is still trading at like $18 a share after like a 25% drop one day. After that, they're still at $18 a share. So maybe I'm missing something, or maybe there's just a lot of inertia. I know a lot of the early investors hold a lot of the shares. So as far as like how much is floating out there, it's pretty small for Nikola. But yeah, I wouldn't. I'm a huge believer in investing in the kind of companies you want to see in the future. Nikola is not a company that I'm investing in.
Yeah. Could you try turning up your audio? Somebody just said in the comments that you're a little quiet.
Okay. Why don't you take a look at that? Yeah. Yep, we will do that. So, is there anything else you want to talk about with this one?
No, I think we can move on.
There's always going to be. We'll cover this again. I have a feeling.
Yeah.
So then the very next one is Portland General Electric and Daimler Trucks of North America are partnering on a 5 megawatt electric semi public charging infrastructure, what they're calling an electric island. And this is an interesting story, again, to the point of the investments that we're going to have to make. We're on the brink of having like the Tesla Semi. We're going to have companies like Arrival who are going to have commercial fleets of EVs. Rivian's going to have a truck and vans for Amazon. So the question is, how are you going to charge these? And Tesla's supercharger network probably isn't going to do it because you can't really potentially back up a big semi into a Tesla charging spot. So I know Tesla's working on mega chargers as well. We're talking not 250 kilowatts, but maybe a megawatt. So 4 times the juice of what we're used to. And so again, this just goes to show you that this is a paradigm shift. This is when we go from horses to petrol stations and gas cars. There's going to be all kinds of infrastructure. And so there's going to be tons of companies that are doing this, Electrify America, and there's a dozen others that are popping up. So it's a bit of the Wild West, and he who controls the charging infrastructure kind of controls that revenue stream, especially in the early days when this stuff is kind of still being fleshed out.
Yeah. And the other thing about the scope of this is this charger is supposedly going to be up to 1 megawatt. Like when it's a fully functional Death Star, it's going to be one megawatt charging. I mean, that's insane. That's 4 Tesla superchargers in one essentially plug. I don't know how that's going to keep cool, how it's going to work. I'm fascinated just by the technology of it, but it kind of drives home the scale that semis are going to need, where it's just so much more than any kind of supercharger or Electrify America charger or ChargePoint can offer. It needs its own infrastructure to be able to do this. And so for me, this story kind of struck a chord because it's the beginning of that new push with semis showing up next year, hopefully. We're going to start to see more and more of this. And the nice thing about it, though, is because unlike passenger cars, where you have to build chargers out across like pretty much everywhere, you can start on the major routes. Trucking lines have very specific paths, so they can be very targeted. So when if UPS buys a Tesla Semi, they can basically say, we're only going to use these semis on this one route, and they can just build a couple of chargers to take care of them to start. So it's like, this is going to be a rollout that's going to probably be a lot slower than you might expect as far as where the charging stations are. But this is just the beginning, and I think it's pretty cool.
Yeah, really well said. This is the electric vehicle frontier. I kind of liken it to the move west in the U.S. in the early centuries. This is that same sort of thing where there's just kind of like a land grab. This would be exactly the prime spots along the I-5, for example, here in California, or the 80 across the U.S. So it's going to be a big deal. By the way, really quickly, you mentioned about the scale of 1 megawatt charging. Mm-hmm. The one thing people don't realize is it does scale up. So for example, if you can imagine 3 Tesla Model 3s, for example, long-range Model 3s, all charging at the same time. Each has a cooling ribbon, each takes that much charge, each has that number of batteries. So really, the mistake I think I watched in one of the YouTube videos I watched in the past was, these are going to take forever to charge because they're going to charge so slowly. Well, no. There's 4 times the number of batteries, which means you can take 4 times the power, which means you can charge it 4 times as quickly, which averages out to about the same. So when these are online, you could fill a Tesla Semi in like the time it would take to fill a Tesla passenger sedan. And as far as like the cooling ribbons and stuff, that would all scale up. So it's an engineering feat. There's a lot that goes on, and the BMSs are working really hard to keep all that battery tech safe and cool, but it does scale up, and it should be interesting to see the first ones that pop up. All I know is when I find one, I'm going to go try to plug them in and see how fast I can charge my car up. With one
it bursts into flames. That's a really good point. I hadn't thought about that, where it's going to be charging about the same rate as you'd expect an EV car will, because it just has much more capacity than a car does. All right, so to jump to the next story, everything we know about Hyundai and Kia's new electric vehicle platform. They just recently announced their new platform, which is a lot like what GM did with their platform. It's a single, it's like a single structure that they can basically be very modular and build whatever they want. So they have this whole structure where was it? Yeah, this very modular approach will be able to do rear-wheel drive, all-wheel drive cars. They'll be able to do trucks and SUVs off the same platform. The batteries are stored like with the axle between the wheels, which I think is an interesting approach. So it's going to be very modular. It's going to make them able to roll out as many cars as they want in different styles and just have one set of things they have to build to support the structure. And they claim that the range, if the ranges are as good as they say they are, it's going to be a very competitive range. These things are going to have, 300 miles range, 400 miles range with this structure. So the thing about Hyundai and Kia is they've actually made some really, really compelling vehicles. But the problem they've had is they haven't been able to meet demand with what they've been supplying. So hopefully a system like this will allow them to manufacture cars at a much faster pace as they roll this out more widely.
Yeah, really well said. I kind of think of Hyundai and Kia, the Hyundai Corporation, as Toyota and Honda back in the 60s and 70s, and Japan. Japan was just kind of upstart, not really well known, and they quickly kind of burst on the scene. And Kia and Hyundai kind of seem to be doing the same sort of thing, especially with EVs. They've been building cars for a while, but they seem more hip to the EV than let's say, for example, Honda or Toyota. But what's also interesting is the platform or the investment in architecture, to me, signals that you're serious about EVs. Because if you don't do that, like, for example, you mentioned about the demand and supply issues they've had. Well, the Ioniq is a normal, the Kona EV, for example, is a gas car with a electric option, which means that the batteries are on the floor or as optimized as they could be. So this platform architecture will give them like a leg up to be able to build cars like from the ground up as EVs. And going back to Nikola, I'd hate to bring up Nikola here, but to me, the difference between a company like Nikola and whenever I think of a company as being serious is you're investing in the architecture. If you tell me, here's a car, we're gonna have this company build it, we're gonna buy these batteries from them, you're a packager. Like, to me, that's not really as, your company is not the value or the investability. It just is not as high as somebody who does want to build it all in-house. And when you talk about architecture, now VW has kind of their MEB architecture. They're going to have a platform upon which they can build numerous different cars from. You know, Tesla's already doing their thing. The 3 and the Y are very similar, and they're going to do more in the future. And this is just the next step. So to me, when I hear companies talk about the architecture of it all, like some people kind of scoffed at GM with their Ultium tech stack, but to me, that shows a lot of thought went into, we're going to have like 30 cars that are electric, people. And to do that, you got to start here, because you can't just go one off and hope to have any kind of success. So good on you, Kia and Hyundai. I hope we see like 5 or 10 cars the next 5 years or so. Less than 5 years, I'd imagine.
Yeah, well, the article says that the cars are going to start to show up in 2021 and 2022. So we're going to see the very first variants of this kind of structure coming out very soon. So we're not going to have to wait that long to start seeing them. But the amount of cars they want to make, you're talking 5 years before they have all that stuff kind of rolled out across the board, having cars to SUVs and trucks. So it's going to be exciting. I agree with you. I mean, you kind of hit the nail on the head. You need thinking like this. You need structure like this to put everything together. And people did make fun of GM a little bit for their Ultium, but I was excited by it. I thought it was pretty cool. I thought they came at the concept and the challenge and brought everything to bear on it. They came up with a good solution. So I'm really curious to see how it plays out. I want it to succeed, but it's awesome to see companies putting that much thought and effort behind it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think they're going to be one of the legacy makers that will survive, by the way. That's my prediction.
Yeah. All right. So next up, this one.
So Matt,
we're both going to have a lot to say on this one.
Yeah, I think we will. Matt wanted me to cover this one, which is funny because I'm the one here who doesn't have the FSD package. But I did have a chance to drive with Tesla Raj in his. He's one of the early first 20 people or so that had the FSD beta. So this is that page 1 rewrite where they kind of went back to the drawing board and really upped their game with all that they learned. And truth be told, the tech is incredibly impressive, to be sure. We were in a parking lot. So it didn't really traverse parking lots pretty well, and he kind of mentioned that was a limitation. So we pulled near the exit of a parking lot, and we just pulled up the map and pinched around and said, let's go there. And we just put a pin and said, navigate to, and sat back. And the car pulled up to stop signs, will kind of peek up and take off and stop at red lights and turn left and turn. It was incredible. And I kept looking over at him because I didn't believe him. I thought he was cheating somehow. Because you're supposed to have your hand on the wheel just in case, right? And you have to be ready to take over. And so, but he's just sitting there and the wheel is spinning and his hands are stationary. It was an incredible experience. So the article here is Elon is extremely confident, which Elon often is, for good reason. The man delivers. You got to give him that. that Tesla will release the full autonomy, at least in some jurisdictions, in the next year, so 2021. So what that really means is, let's say there's a town or a state that's a little more hip and willing to kind of play ball and allow more of the FSD operation, because really there's still a regulatory battle to be had, I think, with the autonomous car. But he's confident that this is going to be ready. So what that should tell people is, when we say FSD beta, it means we're really far along and we are really quickly getting to full self-driving. Now, that being said, the car did make a couple of mistakes. As impressive as it was, the most impressive thing, by the way, there was a stop sign where we were turning right, and there's a car parked on the road in such a way that you cannot tell if you're clear from the stop line where you're supposed to stop. So the average person would kind of creep forward until you have a visibility, and then you make the move. And the Tesla did the exact same thing. It goes to a complete stop at the stop sign and then crawls forward until one of the cameras, with the right skew angle, can look down the line and get a clear, like we're all clear, and then made the right turn. It was unbelievable. But at the same time, one of the things that happened, we were at a stop sign turning left, and there was a car in front of us turning left right in front of us, and the car tried to go, which is like weird and oddly obvious to me. Like, of all the things you just did, you couldn't figure out this situation. So I will say you got to take it with a grain of salt. I think this tech, and what's really cool about like neural nets and machine learning, is the level of acceleration is unbelievable. It's like exponential. You train these models, and the rate at which they get better is like beyond like the grasp of the human mind, kind of a thing. But there's a long way to go. So I think it's gonna be fun to watch the progress. But as the person with FSD, what do you think?
I've not been shy about this. I've said this a bunch of times. In a previous episode, I said the same thing. Full self-driving is not going to be fully here, like you can use it reliably every single day for several more years. It's like, I don't care what Elon says as far as it's going to be here next year. It's like the product will be here next year. It may not be fully baked. It's going to need more time in the oven to work out those situations that you just made note of. Me personally, I am way too excited for this. There's a reason I bought the full self-driving package when it was on sale when I got it, because I want to use it. It's like, this is, like I said, I'm aggressive on my software updates. I want to use this kind of stuff. I'm all in, but I'm not normal in that regard. So it's like, I know the average Joe out there is not gonna feel comfortable with this system until it is like rock solid. You don't want to have what you experienced ever happen. It's like, if that happens to you once, you're going to start doubting everything the car does. And so it's like, it's really important to have this nailed down. And I mean, even Elon has said, it's like, it's easy to get to 99%, accuracy, but it's the 0.1, the 0.2, the 0.3 to get it up to that 100% level that gets harder and harder and harder. And that's, to me, where I feel like full self-driving probably is. It's in that small couple percentage points away from perfection, where it's going to take a while to get there, which is why I say it's going to be several more years at the earliest before people feel truly comfortable with the system. So the other side of it is him and his predictions on this. He's never been right on this with his predictions. He predicted that full self-driving would be here at the end of last year. Didn't happen. You know what I mean? It's like he's never gotten the predictions of when this would be hitting market correct. So I'm still dubious if he's going to do it, but the fact we actually have a beta out there and people are using it, like Tesla Raj is using it, that's the best sign we've ever had that they will be delivering something soon-ish. But I would take his date with a gigantic grain of salt. That's me personally.
All right. So Canadian Bernie Bro says robo-taxi by 2022, and then a little later on he says 7 years. So what do you think? Like, if you had to kind of nail a date, like, are we talking 2025, 5 years out?
I think a true robo-taxi, 5 years at the earliest. I would be shocked if we saw true robo-taxis that didn't, I'm talking like you don't need a steering wheel in the car. Like that kind of option where the car is so good, you don't even need a steering wheel. We're 5 years at the earliest. It's going to be 5-7 years. It's like, but for us getting in our car and saying, I'm going to go over to my mom's house, take me to my mom's house. And then me sitting behind a wheel that I can take over in those rare occurrences, I think that is coming much sooner. So it's like, I think that'll be here within the next year or two. But it's robotaxis, we're a ways off.
Yeah, Robert Powell just joined with one of my friends. Hey, Robert, how's it going? I'm just trying to read some of the comments here. So I recognize Zoltan. He comments often. Robotaxis in California starting 2022, which gets into what I wanted to bring up next, which is if you think about this versus it's kind of the computer vision, which is the Tesla approach, versus LiDAR, which is kind of like Waymo and some other people who've done that approach. Mm-hmm. And what I'm thinking is, who will be the first to operate, let's say, for example, in San Francisco, Boston, LA, like in a city? The car is not qualified to go to, two neighboring towns down, but in a urban city, because there Waymo might be able to have high definition mapping and use LiDAR to say, we know San Francisco, the couple hundred square miles or whatever it is of SF, we have mapped and we can reliably operate here. Whereas what Tesla's doing is no such thing. They're doing the opposite, which is the general solution. We are building a car that is just as capable to drive in SF as it is in Beijing. There's no specialty. We're not building a car that knows a location. It's kind of like as an engineer, I remember in college, my professors, the good ones always told you, don't memorize like formulas. You should be able to derive them or have a piece of paper, like know how to apply them, kind of the more general solution, if you will. So it will be interesting, I think. Somebody mentioned Austin, California. There's some good candidates out there for places to start. But what do you guys think? And I'm sure the comments will start coming in. Yeah. And he's saying the whole state of California.
I was going to say that
the state of California is pretty big, but
what I was going to say was you and I have different experiences on this because like you've actually sat in the full self-driving Tesla, and I've ridden in a Waymo. So it's like we're coming at this from different points. My view is I think you hit the nail on the head. I think Waymo is going to come out of the gates probably first with like having a taxi fleet operating in San Francisco. But Tesla, even though they may lag behind, will end up leapfrogging Waymo because they'll be able to work everywhere. So it's like, I think in the race, like, I think Waymo's got a little bit of an edge to get out the gate first, just because after riding in it, where the thing you described didn't have that at all in the taxi I rode in. It was, you couldn't have gotten more perfect. It was absolutely, it did crazy things at the intersection where it inched out, did the whole thing where it felt like a person was driving the car, but it wasn't. It was a robot. So it's like, it's very similar experience, but because of their LiDAR and the high resolution maps, I think they're going to have an edge in the short run. I think Tesla's going to have the edge in the long run.
Yeah, we shall see. But to be fair, you were driving in like a curated car with like high fidelity instrumentation built in on a road. Tesla Raj had an over-the-air update. He was chosen by Elon as a dude who has a Tesla. No one from Tesla came and inspected his car. Are your cameras all like? Is there a crack in your windshield that would prohibit? They were just like, here you go, let's see what happens, right?
Yeah.
Which is an incredibly, I love that approach. I think that's what makes Tesla really special. Is you have the traditional way of thinking, and at every turn, Elon has a really unique approach, and it should be a fun race, and we'll cover it often. I think this is a topic that we will talk about frequently because there are other players as well we've talked about in the past, and the technology difference is going to be interesting.
47 Solar said full self-driving beta inches out to get better views. So does the Waymo. It's really creepy. It's honestly, to ride one of these things is creepy because the car drives like you would drive, and like you said earlier, you said you kept looking over at Raj to be like, is he actually driving this thing? Is he actually doing that? Because this feels weird. That's how I felt in the taxi. It's like, whoa. I kept looking over the person that was behind the wheel to make sure that they actually weren't doing stuff, because it's like the way it inched out and the way it would take a stop sign, the way it would go inch out at a stop sign of an intersection to see if there was a car coming, and then it would go. It was like, it was so eerily human. It's creepy. That's all I can say.
Did your Waymo have a steering wheel in it and stuff?
Yeah, no, there was a human being behind the steering wheel. And she just sat there with her hands on her lap the entire ride. And she was just there to take over if anything went wrong. She never even put her hand up once. She just kind of sat there just like a lump behind the steering wheel doing nothing.
And yeah, Canadian Bernie Bro mentions that in 5 years, FSD will be way more than $10,000. That is, I think we need to officially talk. We've brushed on this. That comment kind of angers me because I wouldn't mind paying a certain amount of money for FSD. But the reality is, I mentioned, I think last week, I have a family of 4 now, and like my mom and dad come to visit, or my brother or my brother-in-law. I might want to get a bigger car, but if I sink $10,000 in my Model 3 to get it, then what am I going to do if I decide to upgrade in a year? And it's these kinds of things that kind of irk me a bit. Raj and some of my other friends we met in the Bay Area mentioned, if your car is totaled, what happens? The insurance, even Tesla's insurance, will not cover FSD as of today. So they'll give you a replacement model, whatever you had, but it wouldn't cover that. Now, if somebody knows better than me, or if I'm speaking out of turn, we can cover this. We'll have a little disclaimer and a correction next week. But that's what I read, and I think people are getting hip to that as a value that needs to be covered, just like any other cost in a car. But there's so many little wrinkles and variables there. Yeah, I don't know. I'm a little torn on that one. That could be an episode by itself, probably. To be fair.
Yeah. Yeah, the price is going to get way higher than $10,000. I think what's going to end up happening is like the haves and the have-nots. I think the price is going to get so high, it's only going to make sense to somebody who's going to operate their car like a taxi, because that will justify the cost. And then for everybody else, it'll probably be a subscription service. That's my hunch of where this is going to go.
Yeah. So Canadian Bernie Bro says, "Can I buy an FSD? Can I buy FSD today and buy a car later?" I don't think
that'd
you
be
can.
awesome.
Yeah, that would be
that'd
cool.
be great,
so
though.
If I could if I could have done that, I would have done that possibly. But no, you're going to have to check that box when you buy your car at that time.
I really wish it was account based and not car based. So it's like
So many
I
people
buy
have
it, it
mentioned
sticks
that.
with me no matter what Tesla I have. It's mine. It's like that would be so amazing.
Yeah, exactly. There may be like a subscription is the way to think about it. But thank you, Ryan. Super chat from Ryan for our chat here. So one thing I'll say is, have you guys checked out Comma.ai? So Comma is a company that has a self-driving little hardware stack you can buy. It has cameras and I think it's like a Qualcomm chip, ARM chip. But what's really cool is it runs what's called, is it Open Pilot, I think? Autopilot and Open Pilot. I believe it's Open Pilot. Yeah. But anyways, the point is it's an open source platform. And so anybody who knows about self-driving or machine learning or computer vision could be a code contributor. And so this code goes through iterations and it improves. But what's really cool is the company offers the software for free and they sell the hardware. So the hardware is like this integrated piece of equipment that has the cameras and everything built into it. But theoretically, you could build your own if you wanted to and run Open Pilot. So what's really interesting is I really hope they do well. Their founder is brilliant, by the way. He's a genius guy. I've heard him talk a couple times. He's really fun to listen to. I think his name's George Hotz, I think. But he is trying to solve this from another perspective. And their approaches are different from Tesla's at times. But imagine if there was a open player who could kind of rally the troops. The only way I can see Tesla having some control over their ridiculous pricing in the future would be competition from someone like that.
Yeah. So we're kind of transitioning right now, kind of unofficially. We're transitioning into the kind of the Q&A of the show.
Do you want to make it?
Yeah, let's cut
official?
it right here. We can basically say, got any questions? Shoot them off in the comments right now because we're going to try to start answering questions.
So there was one question I wanted you to answer from earlier on. It was from Emilio, who says, will you guys talk about smart home stuff? So one thing I wanted to ask you, Mr. Farrell, is I just bought my mom and dad a couple of Ring cameras. And the reason was I don't want to stand like an on-premises hard drive like NAS or something. And I'm not really a fan of off-premises cloud stuff typically, but for my parents, I just thought I'm here for a week. let's get them some cameras for their new farm so they can have a little bit of privacy and stuff. But the question is, smart home stuff. What smart home stuff are you interested in right now?
The stuff I've been focusing on most recently is smart home stuff that has to do with sustainability, of trying to cut down my energy usage, be more efficient with my home. That's where my interest has been going more recently. So smart water heaters, like basically adding a brain to my water heater, things like that. My ecobee thermostat, anything I can sense energy monitoring. It's like that's kind of where my interests have been going, because everything else in my smart home is pretty much set up and humming along just fine. But yeah, it's like getting your parents' ring. I don't blame you for that at all. It's like that's a fine choice because it's plug and play. It's a reliable system. It's not that expensive for a monthly fee. Your parents will have no problem using it. But like for me, I've basically cut the cord with Amazon because except for my Eros, but like Amazon, I kind of like get a little skeeved out by Amazon's privacy issues they've had over the past couple of years, but they've been getting better. But by and large, they're a good company.
I'm with you on the Amazon thing. Yeah, it's a shame. There's all these really cool, innovative companies. Ring was on Shark Tank. I remember that episode. It was this young guy, and now he's on Shark Tank as a investor, which is a super cool story. But of course, invariably, all these companies end up getting bought out by Google, which Nest bought Google, and Amazon. And so it just bugs me that all these really big-time data collection companies are buying equipment that has microphones that are in everyone's houses, you know. When I bought my Ring cameras, by the way.
I was going to say, Ring's flying camera, have you seen that?
No.
That they announced? They have a drone that will, it looks like a little box that sits down, and it will like a Terminator device flies up and will fly around your house. It's like I don't want to wake up in the middle of the night to like, what's that buzzing sound? And the camera's just hovering over me. Like Jeff Bezos is watching what I'm doing. Yeah. It's a very cool device, though. I gotta say, it's pretty cool, but it is creepy that it's like a big brother when you're talking about something like an Amazon. That kind of makes me nervous.
Completely agree. Yeah, I have Eero access points for my wireless network. I actually didn't know it was an Amazon company until my brother told me. I was like, damn it, I might have to get rid of it now. But
that's how I've been on the fence of like, I've gotten rid of everything Amazon except for that because I really do like the Eero. It works really well.
Yeah, no, I have no complaint with it. And honestly, that is a device where I don't think there's a microphone on it. Although, who knows? Maybe there is. When I bought my Ring, the floodlight cameras for my mom and dad, they came with free Amazon Show 5s. They're the 5-inch screen Amazons where you can ask questions and all that kind of stuff. But they're literally giving these away. I remember last year for Ring, if you bought a Ring doorbell, they gave away the Echo Dot. So they're giving you like more and more stuff for free. And that should always tell you what's going on. If a company is happy to give you something with a microphone and a camera for free, you should definitely think twice.
Yes.
All right. Other questions. Let's see here. Jerry says, my cat would take down the mini drone. Jerry, I need to borrow your cat then.
Some people bring up the Wise cameras, and I would agree. Those are like, a $25 camera is kind of hard to argue with, but my only concern with them is I'm not super comfortable with the company, with the cloud storage and all that kind of stuff. But the nice thing about the Wise cams is you can turn all that off and store things locally if you want. So it's a great affordable option if you're just trying to get into things cheap.
What's the one you mentioned on your channel? Was it Eufy? Was that the one that
Eufy is my favorite
okay.
smart home camera.
So for anybody looking for a smart home camera, I think Mr. Farrell has decreed Eufy is where you should.
It's Eufy.
Yeah, I saw those. I just kind of thought the setup might be more complicated, but I think I would go that route for myself.
Canadian Bernie says the Audi has drone headlights that fly in front of the vehicle. Is that true?
I'll have to Google that now.
Because I haven't heard that, and if that's true, I must have that.
We'll look it up. We'll see. And so earlier on, Tesla Model 3 Texas mentioned, I have an email from my insurance company that says that FSD would be covered. So maybe the bigger point is make sure to double check and have an answer to that. But he mentions later on, my acceleration boost was not covered. So yeah, I mean, it's a brave new world where we live, where you're adding stuff to your car after you buy it, but make sure it's covered. Yeah, I think I have seen that. It's kind of funny.
I saw it on the Joe Rogan show. It sounds like it was a concept car, but that sounds like an awesome concept.
It does. It definitely does.
Launch the drones, have some kind of like little flip up, like little screen. You push a button, and they just launch off the front of your car.
Yeah. Or, there's traffic. Traffic's bad enough. Launch the drone. Go find an alternate route. Somebody mentions, what about privacy in Tesla cars and even internal combustion engine cars in general? Yeah. I don't know, Matt, if you have any videos planned around this, but I do want to cover this because, I mean, you even have a camera on the inside of your Tesla, which eventually they're going to use for making sure that you're alert and stuff. But I mean, I haven't really heard any stories about Tesla and how their data is used. I do think it's largely anonymized, especially in the interest of like the full self-driving stuff. But like they know how fast you're driving and where you are and all the stuff about you at all times. And no one is, above reproach in terms of like hackers and data loss. So yeah, that's an interesting point. I try not to think about it too much because the Tesla is the one really smart device that I kind of give carte blanche, like, okay, you're good. I'm not going to worry too much about you because I just love you too much. But do you know anything more
about Tesla specifically? No, I do know they anonymize some data. They don't anonymize everything, from what I understand. There are some. I've spoken to people in the hacking community that told me some things that gave me some pause about how Tesla had set some things up. Like the superchargers are just dumb. They don't verify anything. So it's possible to essentially hack the supercharger network because it's the car telling the charger, yeah, I can charge. So if you basically can give your car full like lifetime supercharging, Tesla catches you, they'll shut you off. But they played fast and loose with the way they set up their cars in the beginning. And from what I've understood from the way it's been described to me is they've gotten much better about their security and going back and doing things kind of the right way. Now that they're more established, they can kind of take a breath and go back and redo everything. So from a security perspective, I think the cars are really sound now. But I don't think they're anonymizing everything the way they should be. Like my personal take is Apple does it right. They anonymize pretty much everything. So Apple knows everything their users are doing in a vague sense, but they don't know what you're doing specifically with all of your data. I really hope that every technology company goes that same path. Google is starting to go down that path a little bit. I really hope Tesla does too, but I have a feeling they're not because they were moving so fast that they probably weren't thinking about privacy. Because they're in control of their own little ecosystem. So if you're not in Tesla, you don't know this stuff. So they probably weren't too concerned about it. But as a privacy advocate for myself, it's like it's the one device I own that I have serious questions about. It's like I trust Tesla right now, but will I trust Tesla in 5 years? Will I trust them in 10 years? I don't know where this is going to go. So I really do hope they lock everything down and make it in our control so that we can manage who sees what. But I have a feeling they're not going to do that because they're using a lot of this data to train their cars. So it's like for the greater good, I'm okay right now.
There's a way to do it correctly. You could, if you anonymize everything and you do the right, you take the right measures, there's still a way to do it, with privacy in mind. But you're totally right. One thing I always mention to my friends, have you watched the documentary, The Social Dilemma on Netflix?
No.
You have to watch that. It's incredibly funny. Like I'm not really a big fan of social networking in general. I'm always telling my wife and my friends like get off Facebook and stuff. But they in the show they talk about like how these companies work. I work at a software company at a big software company, so like I can tell you, we put a lot of time and thought into how you interact with whatever technology you're dealing with. And I will also say in the U.S., I don't think the regulators and the policymakers are anywhere near like hip enough to this stuff. I think we need more like software advocates. The guy who makes that documentary is very much a software advocate for privacy, but we need more people like that in positions of power. In Europe, for example, they have much better controls over this stuff. I remember we had this huge move to anonymize data and to do certain kinds of like obfuscation and things in logs, things that we send to make sure that your device is acting right. And it was all because of Europe, not because of the U.S. But we just did it. We just did it over everything because we figured eventually it'll catch up here in the U.S. But Europe is way far ahead, and so I'm almost wondering if Tesla does things differently there versus here just because they can. These are the kinds of things that we're going to need time to really get to the bottom of, but everyone should definitely be thinking about privacy. It's going to be one of these like foundational pillars of what we all talk about in the next 20 years. Because right now, people are still impressed with their shiny toys and their Amazon shows. And look, honey, I can say, how do you make a gingerbread cookie? And I can get recipes and instructions on this cool device from 10 feet away. That all right now still sounds cool. But when you start to consider what is happening with your data, I think like the sober reality will settle in like 10 years from now. But let's hope Tesla really does have privacy in mind, and they do follow up with that.
I think you and I both, our careers are both in technology. And you and I probably are very aware of what kind of data you can collect and what you can do with that data and how data is used. I've worked at companies that we knew way too much about our users, and we use that data internally, not to do some kind of evil doing. Like I ran user interface teams, and it's like we were using that data to make our product better. So we were like seeing entire user sessions of like what people were doing, which is kind of like, it would be like me standing behind them, like behind their shoulder, like leaning over there. Why? Oh, you're clicking on that now. You're clicking on this thing. It's like, that's the level of detail that you can get. And it's kind of disturbing when you think about it. So it's part of why my personal take on privacy has gotten kind of extreme, because I know what's collected and how it can be used, and it kind of disturbs me. And Europe, you're 100% correct, is way out ahead compared to us on stuff like this. And we need to do some catch up and understand what's going on.
You got to watch The Social Dilemma. I want to pick your brain on what you think about it. Yeah, being an interface designer, you're going to relate very well to it. By the way, really quickly, we had a question from Bong Hollywood who asked about our power walls here, and I will tell you, that thing continually impresses me. I have this home monitoring, I have an iPad hung on my wall that I can just walk by all day and see how the power usage is and stuff. I'm a nerd, right? I'm sorry. But yesterday and today, from 4 to 9 p.m., I have it programmed. That's my really expensive peak time. I have it set up to Powerwall, power my entire house, give me a zero bill during that time. But yesterday and today, I walked by and I had an energy usage, and I'm looking at it like, I'm using power right now from the grid. What's going on? So I pull out the app, and it says Storm Watch. And I'm thinking, it's 75 degrees and sunny here in San Diego. What are you talking about? But I just found out in Orange County, I have some friends in like near Irvine, 90 miles north of here, who are watching to have to potentially evacuate because of fires. We had some pretty strong winds, and it's still really dry. We still haven't had any rain. So we're still in kind of the fire season, and it's been as if 2020 wasn't bad enough, right? I mean, this feels like it's never going to end, but my Powerwall is smarter than all of us. It tells me what's going on. I have a reality check one day that I'm going to ask my Powerwall, like, are we okay? And it'll tell me, because it knows more about this than we do. Which, again, the privacy aspect is interesting, but the Powerwall is super smart, and it is at 100% right now and ready to kick in if anything happens. And my wife is in here. She mentioned something, but she has friends in Poway, which is about 25 miles from here, who don't have power right now. So, yeah, Powerwalls.
Yeah, I'm going to be putting out a video about my experience getting mine installed. I'm not going to be slamming Tesla. at all, but my experience getting it installed was a nightmare. Would be the best way to put it. It was
So the difference was I had it installed from Tesla. You had a third-party vendor, right?
Yes, but it was a comedy of errors between Tesla, the installer, missing parts, getting those parts, getting rescheduled to get it installed again. The company that installed it got hit by COVID, so they couldn't do something, and like it was just like it was months getting the stupid thing installed. I had it installed on my garage wall, but it wasn't turned on because of this like $1 missing part. That's the communication between the gateway and the Powerwall. It's finally up and running. It's been up and running now for, I think, 3 weeks, 2.5 weeks. But it's kind of anticlimactic for me because my solar panel system in the wintertime right about now is making very little power. So it's like I can't be fully powered off my solar system. It's not going to be until like next March that it starts to go back up again. So right now the battery is basically going to be acting as a winter storm, knocking the power out backup for me. And I'm really excited about the storm watch because I have a feeling the storm watch is going to kick in a lot for me over the winter. So I'm really excited to have that kind of backing me up.
I believe if there's a storm watch scenario that it can charge off the grid and be fully charged in preparation for it. So still valuable, even if.
Yeah, I've also applied to be part of the virtual power plant system in my area, which means my battery will behave like part of a gigantic mega pack for the Boston area, and I'll get money paid back to me because of that.
That's awesome, man.
So I will end up, if you're in a system like this, you will pay off the value of the Powerwall in 4 or 5 years. It's like just from the virtual power plant system.
We need to take note. We got to cover that in a future episode because as hip as we think we are here in California, our utility companies are not that clever. They just aren't. Bong Hollywood sounds like maybe 10 miles from me, and he knows what I'm talking about. We are not that clever, and we don't have systems like that. Yeah. But that's interesting because that is probably the reason why the Powerwall isn't a 100% recommend for me is economics. If you're buying for economics, you're probably not going to buy the Powerwall. If you're buying for battery backup and emergency preparedness, no doubt. It feels nice knowing that no matter what happens out there, we're going to have power.
Yeah. I'm in the same boat. I would not recommend it because of cost. But here in Massachusetts, we have the virtual power plant system, and there's another Clean Peak standard that just got enacted that's going to give more incentives for battery storage. So Massachusetts is actually a great place to install home batteries now. Like it's worthwhile here for sure.
That's awesome. Actually, while we're talking about this, 47 Solar, you see that question?
How much solar does your system currently produce per day, Matt? I'm seeing 3 to 6 kilowatts. It depends on the time of year. Like you could see in
the wintertime. Like
in the heart of winter.
January.
1 kilowatt.
Is it covered in snow?
My house is in a weird location. The way my roof is angled, and my neighbors have trees that even though they don't have leaves on them right now, and the sun is so low in the sky for where I am that my house just does not get a full like bake of sun over the course of the day. So it's the fact that I live far enough north and the way my house is oriented in the middle of winter, I only get like 1, if I'm lucky, 2 kilowatts. But in the summertime, completely different game. Like spring, summer, and fall, it's completely inverted from that. It's like I'm producing way more than I need. So over the course of the year, it works out pretty well.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because I'm doing a video on cleaning your solar panels and if you need to do it or not. And I wanted to kind of touch base with people from a little more like harsh winters. Here, our drop-off is actually pretty small. I'm still making like 18 or 20 kilowatts in kilowatt hours over the course of a day. But yeah, the sun is lower in the sky and you're at a higher latitude in general as well. So those are the kinds of factors that will determine that. But that's good to know. But you're saying I remember I
was going to say my favorite thing about the snow is it melts off solar panels really fast. Like the neighbors will have a foot of snow on the roof for a week, 2 weeks, And like 2 days later, my roof is clear because there was an avalanche of snow that just slid off the panels, and so everything's clear. It's kind of funny and terrifying when it happens. It's a couple tons of snow flying off your roof all at once.
Yeah, it's different world in that regard. It doesn't even get freezing here. You know that? Like our coldest night will be like 42 degrees.
You're just rubbing it in right now. That's all you're doing.
I don't know.
You're just rubbing it in.
How do you give weather news without sounding like an a-hole? I don't know. I know.
It's beautiful and sunny again here.
Well, we're in the middle of fires in December. If that makes you feel better, it's absurd. It really is. You know, we talk about this kind of stuff. Like I'm sure you're on the same boat as me. Thinking about the future, what kind of a world are we going to have? It's getting pretty crazy. I don't even know what San Diego is going to be like in 20 years in terms of the fire season getting longer and longer, and the raining season getting shorter. And yeah, this is why we cover this stuff and we talk about this transition, because it can't, for me anyway, it can't come soon enough.
Yeah.
800 kilowatt hours last month in Cleveland. That's awesome. That's a big system.
That's Craig Cooper, friend of the channel.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah. He's one of my patrons. He's awesome. I met him at Fully Charged. You may have met him too.
Yeah.
Really great guy. And he has a massive system. Like, it's insane. Multiple power walls, oversized solar. He's all decked out.
Yeah, it sounds like it. To make 800 kilowatt hours in November, that's a damn big system. Chris Arnold, who's my good friend, he used to run the channel with me. He was, he's living the life in retirement now, I think. But he's here. He just says Ricky lies. It was 36 degrees at his house the other night. It does get colder where he is, which is weird because I think he's actually closer to the ocean than I am. But it does get cold where he lives. I'll give you that.
Somebody asked what I produce in the middle of summer. In July, I produced 1.1 megawatt hours.
Really?
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now.
Holy smokes! Wow, you got a big system too.
The sine wave of my system is like huge in the summer, and then like almost nothing in the winter. So, but over the course of the year, it kind of just all evens out over the course of the year.
That's not too bad. So between 1 megawatt and 1 kilowatt hour. Okay.
Well, that was per day. That was not per month. That was per day.
Yeah.
But still,
yeah,
a megawatt in a month. I'm happy with that.
I will say this format. Hopefully you guys enjoy. Thank you for all of you guys who have checked this out. And by the way, before this call, I went to some bigger channels, like sports channels and things, who do live shows on occasion to see what kind of numbers they get. And doing a live show is tough. There's a lot of things happening. So nearly 100 of you guys watching. Really honored to have you guys join us live. And this was a fun format. I really think the energy was just there in terms of seeing people in real time asking you questions and stuff and being able to address it. And I think what we will do going forward is we will script our topics to about 30 minutes and leave 30 minutes to kind of just shoot the breeze.
Yeah. This is a lot of fun.
And I didn't mention this time around, but we also have a podcast. So wherever you get your podcast from, we'll have a link to that in the description. And somebody mentioned adding chapters to the video, so we'll have that as well if you want to go back and look. And I think, do we just leave the entire hour up on our channel?
I don't see why not. We should just try it and leave the full hour up.
Yes. And so next week, if there's any pressing questions that you guys have, write them down and be sure to join us again next week.
All right. Well, thanks so much, everybody, for joining us. Can't wait to see you next week. As Ricky said, be sure to subscribe to the audio podcast if you want the audio version of this. And we'll see you next time.